Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm great.
I'm really excited you're in my room now.
Oh, we're here in Koi's room.
We're both in Texas. It's very exciting. And we are on episode 3 of Who Is That? The podcast.
Wow.
Wow.
Episode 3.
I know.
I feel
Lucky
like so
number
much
3.
has happened in such a short amount of time.
I know. I feel like, I've had like 20 cups of coffee today.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
shaking.
what I was talking about.
Yeah. Not anything
We
else.
drank a lot of coffee in a short amount of time.
Not you traveling internationally
Yeah,
to get here.
That was scary.
I'm sorry. I'm glad that you made it unscathed.
Me too. Me as well.
You
and then quarantined so that I didn't infect you.
Thank you. I appreciate that because I would never forgive you.
Okay.
Just kidding.
I'm Taylor Edwards.
And I'm Koi Branscombe. And we're really excited to be here for our first episode where we discuss not politicians, but policy.
Yeah. No interview today.
Mm-mm.
Not politicians.
An interview.
But policy.
It's an interview with history.
Oh my. It is though. It is. We're going to talk shop.
Mm. And the shop we're visiting, stupid.
The topic, today's topic.
And today
the topic
on NPR. No.
NPR, please don't sue us.
Please, God. Electoral College.
Dun, 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 dun.
We know it, but we don't like know it, you know? It's like that weird aunt that you never meet, but she sends you Christmas presents. Mm-hmm. I don't know. This is like personal experience. Like I literally had an aunt, Mary, who used to send us gifts, but I never met her.
So anyway, the Electoral College is racist.
It's so racist.
It's garbage. Let's get into it. First, what is that?
What is it, Taylor? Tell me.
It's the Electoral College. Actually, funny story. During the previous election, 2020 election. I don't have to say that, do I? Funny story. During the election, I was in Canada on election night, and actually for the whole process. And all the Canadians were very confused about the Electoral College thing. I mean, I don't actually know how the political system works in Canada. I'm not sure they do. They're not like terribly politically involved people, but they were very confused about the Electoral College and why it mattered.
I mean, I too share that confusion.
I also, me as well, but I wrote this 7-page paper.
Also called Talking Points.
Also called Talking Points.
Turned into an essay.
Mm-hmm. Yes. There's a lot. So let's get started. Otherwise, this will be a 3-hour-long podcast. So the Electoral College. It is not a college. It's not like a building, an institution. It's just a group of people. And they have a very important job, which is that they elect the President of the United States.
The job title is to be an elector.
Yes.
And pretty much anybody can become an elector for their state.
Okay.
The most common method to become an elector is that you get nominated at the state party convention or by a vote of the state party's central committee. Mm-hmm. And every 4 years, each party appoints new state electors, and they are supposed to represent the will of the people in the presidential election. But there are some rules. So you can't have previously held federal office. You can't be a member of Congress. According to the 14th Amendment, you cannot have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the United States or given aid or comfort to its enemies.
Yeah. And the 14th Amendment was ratified right after the Civil War, right?
Yes.
So that gives a little context to exactly what was meant by rebellion and insurrection.
We're looking at you, Confederacy.
So
Proud Boys. I'm just gonna say it.
Called right out.
Sorry.
I mean,
prove
us wrong.
Yeah. Please don't.
Please don't talk to us. We're frightened. You're very frightening. College stands for collegium, or a group of colleagues. So the Electoral College just means a group of people who do the electing.
That's so pretentious.
It is.
A collegium.
It's actually pretentious.
Yes, it's the electoral collegium.
The Electoral Collegium.
I'm electoral for the collegium. Everybody in my head in like the 17 and 1800s is that actor
85.
who plays Dumbledore in Harry Potter, the second one. It's just always him, you know, with his
a little
like,
bit like Voldemort. Do the thing.
Harry Potter, the boy who lived, come to die.
Okay, so it's a group of people who do the electing. We covered that.
Mhm.
Each state gets one elector for each member of Congress representing the state in Washington.
So that means that there are 2 electors for the state's 2 senators, plus an elector for each member of the House of Representatives.
Yes. So Delaware, with 2 senators and only 1 representative in the House, gets 3 electoral votes. Meanwhile, and due to a much larger population, Texas has 38 electors, 1 for each of the 2 senators and 1 for each of the 36 representatives in the House, which is based on population. According to the 2019 census, Texas's population was around 29 million, while Delaware's was just over 900,000. It's a big difference. So a bigger population equals more votes, and that sort of sounds fair-ish.
Kind of. But there's more.
But there's so much more. It gets weird.
Okay, so the Electoral College operates on a winner-takes-all system in most of the states, except for Maine and Nebraska. Those 2 sneaky states doing their own thing.
Different.
They're
different.
They're just different from the rest.
They're doing things different.
They are. Not better, just different. Well, maybe they are doing it better. Stay tuned. So if Delaware, out of their 900,000-ish people, if 480-something thousand vote for candidate A, then that candidate receives all of their electoral votes.
All 3.
Yep, all 3 of them. And if about 15 million of the 29-ish million in Texas vote for candidate B, then candidate B gets the 38 electoral votes that Texas has to offer.
Right. So still, we have significantly more people,
Mhm.
15 million versus like 487,000.
Right.
That's a huge difference. And they get more votes toward the president. So, okay.
Perfect.
There are a total of 538 electoral votes up for grabs across the country, and a candidate only needs to receive a majority of those votes in order to win the presidency. That's 270.
270 votes. And you have the next president of the United States.
At first glance, that might still seem fair, but let's do an experiment. Stick with us. We're going to throw some numbers around.
I hate math.
So let's take Delaware versus Texas as an example. Remember, Texas has a population of around 29 million and has 38 electoral votes, all going to candidate B, where Delaware has a population of just over 900,000 and gets only 3 electoral votes going to candidate A. Let's say each candidate is winning their respective states with only 52% of the popular vote. That's 506,357 votes going to candidate A in Delaware, and 15,080,000 votes going to candidate B in Texas. Candidate B is winning, but what happens if we expand our sample country and give Delaware some friends? Let's say that Delaware, Alabama, Kentucky, North Dakota, Arkansas, Oregon, and Rhode Island are all giving their electoral votes to candidate A with that very small majority of 52%.
Their combined population is around 19.5 million, which is still so much less than Texas with its 29 million. However, our little coalition of states now has 40 electoral votes to give to candidate A compared to Texas, who still only has 38 electoral votes, despite having almost 10 million more people.
Mm-hmm. If we go back to our 52%, candidate A wins with 40 electoral votes, representing the combined will of 24,008,949 people, while candidate B loses with 38 electoral votes, despite the fact that those votes represent the combined will of 24,392,876 people. Candidate B was preferred by around 380,000 people across all 8 states, and still lost our little sample election.
And that's how a candidate can win the popular vote and still lose the Electoral College.
Obviously, there are more than just 8 states in our country, so the math is a little different. But if it sounds convoluted, unnecessary, and hard to understand, it's because it was designed that way.
Those bastards.
Okay.
So let's talk a little bit of history on the Electoral College, shall we?
We shall.
We shall. So the Electoral College, as we know it, was created in 1787 at the Philadelphia Convention.
The same Philadelphia Convention, which gave us the Constitution of the United States of America, the 3 branches of government, and checks and balances.
It was a big meeting.
It was. And it lasted a long time.
It's still ticking.
It came on the heels of the American Revolutionary War. So there was a lot to discuss about how to run the new country, including how the chief executive should be chosen.
So some of the delegates at the convention felt strongly that Congress should have nothing to do with electing the president. They were concerned about the potential for corruption or quid pro quo, things like that.
Shady deals.
Yeah. So you scratch my back, I'll give you the presidency.
Mm-hmm.
That's how that old saying goes. You're president. She scratched my back. I just forget some people are just listening.
Okay.
So potential for corruption, blah, blah, blah.
Shady deals.
Shady deals. So there was another group of delegates who felt that they could never allow the people to elect their president by popular vote because they believed the general public was uneducated and lacked the resources to be fully informed, which at the time they weren't wrong. A lot of people didn't have the resources. They didn't know how to read. They were not educated. So it made a little bit of sense, but it was also a little bit condescending and disrespectful.
It's a little bit gross.
It's still gross. So the fear with a popular vote, one of the big fears, was that they feared that the country would be vulnerable to demagogues, which are candidates that would manipulate the people by appealing to their desires and prejudices rather than using logical argument to win their favor.
Yeah, that never happens.
Never.
I've never heard of that ever happening. The Electoral College was created as a compromise between these two groups, not affiliated with federal office or Congress, nor elected by the people. Each state would choose its electors however they thought best. Electors were designed to serve as enlightened gatekeepers, generally reflecting the will of the people, but intervening if the people elected a president that might be considered dangerous. The Electoral College did not originally have any kind of party affiliation like they do now. So there weren't Democratic electors and Republican electors. That's what we do now. Each party chooses its electors. But originally, each state was just supposed to send a group of people based on population. They were to be trusted to mostly follow the will of the people, but to make their own judgments when necessary, which is just
so gross. Also,
disgusting.
Enlightened gatekeepers. Disgusting.
Enlightened gatekeepers.
Everybody.
That's disgusting.
It's disgusting. So let's talk about the racist, white supremacist elephant in the room, shall we? One of the original.
Doesn't it feel like we always have to?
We do. One must.
When speaking of
the past.
Not the past. And
the present.
The present.
One of the original supporters of the Electoral College was a guy named James Madison, and you might remember him as a founding father, or the 4th president of the United States, or one of the authors of the Federalist Papers, which is what heavily influenced our Constitution.
Yeah, sort of the blueprint.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, people started calling him the father of the Constitution, and in a minute, that's going to make you really mad, or at least it should. Makes me really mad.
So a big part of the reason that the Electoral College was even considered was because the voting population,
white landowning men,
in the North was significantly larger than that of the South. That's because of slavery. So the population overall, as in the actual number of people, was much larger in the South because of huge plantations with a lot of enslaved Black people who were owned by a small number of white men.
If a direct popular vote was to decide the presidency, the northern states would dominate every time, and that wasn't going to work for the South. And James Madison made that very clear. He was from Virginia, where enslaved Black people made up 60% of the population. And we have to assume there were some white women around too. So the voting population of Virginia was definitely less than 40%, possibly as low as 20. The southern states kept threatening to secede from the Union. So they came up with a compromise, the Electoral College, a group of white men representing each state based on population.
Ugh. This is where it gets really messy.
The whole thing is so gross.
It's like we're not even to the like meat and potatoes of it, and I'm already like heated about it. I know. You know,
I feel like whenever you say the Electoral College is racist, people are like, yeah, it's racist.
Yeah, but they
don't
in the
understand. Way that everything in the U.S. is like a little bit racist because white supremacy is the foundation of the country. But
everything is racist in a country that's on stolen land. That was built on the backs of enslaved people.
Yes.
Like, sorry. So the way the population was tallied was another debate. Northern states didn't want the southern states to be able to count enslaved people in their population because they couldn't vote anyway.
And they had just fought a war about that. Like taxation without representation.
It's just like so fresh too.
It is so gross. This whole thing is disgusting.
It is. So, right. Black people don't get representation in government, and they can't vote, so they shouldn't be counted, is what the North was saying.
That's what the North said.
Don't count them in the population. But the South disagreed, and that's how we got the 3/5 compromise, which is just like really nauseating to think about. So enslaved Black people would be counted as 3/5 of a person in the population tally. And that led to a really horrific practice of buying more slaves or forcing slaves to reproduce so that the South would dominate in elections. They were like using them as just like bodies to tally. It's, I think, like saying it out loud is really hard.
It's really hard.
I'm like, so I don't like, they don't teach you this in school.
Of course not.
They're like, and the 3/5 compromise, and moving on, and the Native Americans, the Trail of Tears, they danced all the way to their reservation. Like, they just teach it so whitewashed.
The revisionist history of United States schools is absurd.
But then when you stop and think about it, a group of like maybe less than 20% of the population of the South was forcing, like breeding cattle. They were like forcing like their Black enslaved people to reproduce purely so that they could win elections. Like,
that they could maintain their power and the ability to hold slaves. So it all comes back to this. And this is what we meant by, this is big racist.
It's like, oh, it's so
This
bad.
is white supremacist.
Mm-hmm.
So
the elephant in the room.
The origins of the Electoral College are white supremacy, full stop.
Yeah.
Even after slavery was abolished and Black men were given the right to vote, the southern states oppressed and suppressed Black voters and effectively benefited from a 5/5 clause. So each Black person contributed to population tally, but were still denied representation.
It just makes me angry.
It should.
It's hard to talk about, but we have to.
And that's why we hate James Madison. This is now a Fuck James Madison podcast.
Fuck James Madison. Fuck all of them, honestly. But today we're specifically angry at him.
Especially you, James Madison.
His like relatives, like his descendants, are gonna be like cease and desist.
Oh yeah.
Nah, I stand by it. He's a public figure.
Also, this is disgusting.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm not saying that I don't like the way you wear your. How many times have I said
disgusting?
Well, it all is disgusting. So there have been a lot of conversations and attempts to abolish the Electoral College, and we came wicked close in 1969. Mm-hmm. So a year earlier, in 1968, there was a Gallup poll that found that 80% of American citizens thought it was time for a new system. The House of Representatives passed a constitutional amendment that would replace the Electoral College with a popular vote. And it went to the Senate, where it was blocked with a filibuster led by, you guessed it, Southern senators.
Southern Democrats, to be precise.
Southern segregationist Democrats. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah. Wow. Shocking.
To no one. Shocking to no one.
And to the surprise of exactly no one.
To the surprise of zero people.
Okay. So we have established that the Electoral College it's antiquated, it's racist, it's elitist, and honestly, it makes zero sense. So how do those original arguments in favor of it hold up today? Let's break it down. The general population of the US today is more educated than we've ever been, and not just because of the public school system, which didn't exist as we know it in 1787, but also because of resources that are widely available via the internet.
The internet. Twinkle, twinkle.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, there is a lot of propaganda and misinformation.
And not everyone has reliable access to the internet.
Right.
It's true.
But the fact does remain that pretty much every American over the age of 18 knows the names Donald Trump and Joe Biden, and they could give you at least a basic understanding of their platforms.
For sure, for sure. This fact completely overturns that original elitist argument that the rank and file citizenry were incapable of making a decision about their leadership due to lack of information or education.
So in addition to the racism, the Electoral College is a prime example of political elites holding all the power and considering the average citizen of their country to be too stupid to make an educated decision for themselves. Mm-hmm. And even if they were sincerely concerned and hadn't been trying to hold on to as much power as they possibly could, it's still condescending and really gross.
Yep.
Like there's not a positive spin on this.
No. The system isn't even working the way the people who designed it thought it would, other than the part about maintaining the power of slaveholders and eventually segregationists. The framers of the Constitution assumed that the electors would vote however they wanted to, instead of by party line, because parties as we know them didn't even exist. They certainly didn't foresee the national two-party system we have today.
They thought that so many people would run for president that there was no way to find a majority winner through the Electoral College.
Yeah.
They believed that nobody would ever get to 270. And so they built the system assuming that the House of Representatives, who are elected by popular vote, would be the ones that pick the president.
So let me get this straight. The southern states threatened to secede.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, okay, here, how about this horrible compromise, this horrible racist, white supremacist compromise to get the Electoral College? But they still thought it would eventually go to a group of people who were elected by popular vote.
Yeah, so in a really convoluted way, the intention was always that some form of popular vote would win the presidency. It's just like,
so it's a sham.
It's like when your like Google Maps takes you like all the back roads and you could have just gone on the highway, but it was like there's traffic. You know? It's a stupid analogy.
U.S. residents, by and large, want to feel that their voice matters and has equal weight. The Electoral College, by its very nature, is unfair to anyone, to whichever group is in the minority in a given state, whether that's independents, the Green Party, Democrats, Republicans, or any other group.
Yeah. So the misconception here is that because of the racist history of the Electoral College and because it mostly benefits today's Republican Party, that it's only Democrats that have a problem with the Electoral College.
But there have been many Republican leaders who have called for or supported its abolishment. There's Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, George H.W. Bush, and even Newt Gingrich, for example.
My fave. George H.W. You can't say, it's like a rule, it's like a state law in Texas. You can't say W correctly when talking about the Bush family.
George H.W. Bush.
W.
W.
W. W. The Electoral College isn't even used beyond the presidential elections, in case you were wondering. So the Electoral College is actually only used for presidential elections. Every single office, city council, state representative, assembly person, senator, governor, and even those in the United States Congress are all elected by popular vote.
I think when people who think we should have the Electoral College think of a popular vote, they think of this really like messy thing that will never work.
They think of caucuses. You know how like in Iowa caucuses, it is kind of a popular vote, like but you like stand in a room. I wonder, and that's kind of convoluted and messy. And
I
I
think
wonder,
they see like a mountain of papers. Just how are they ever going to count all these papers?
but we do it anyway.
We do it.
We already have a popular
That's
vote.
what we do.
We just look at it like 2016. It was like, oh, sorry, Hillary, you won by 3 million votes. Womp womp.
Like we have it. Like the popular vote already exists.
It's like we're doing all of this work, and then we're like, but that doesn't really matter.
To placate Southern slaveholders.
Racism.
That's the intro to every video.
That's Kathleen. There's your intro. Racist. And now there's something we hope you'll really like. Newt Gingrich flies in like an owl.
Okay, so what would happen if the Electoral College disappeared? Well, we kind of already just talked about it. The president would be elected by popular vote, which we already count.
And that means that everybody's vote would be weighted equally. So if you're a conservative in California or a progressive in Texas, your vote has weight and it matters.
Yeah. And probably most importantly, we would be dismantling yet another racist system that upholds white supremacy in our country.
So if we don't have the Electoral College, how do we count votes? Well, I'm glad you asked.
I'm glad you asked, Coy.
I'm glad you asked too, Coy. There are a few options.
Mm-hmm. We could just use the thing we already have.
Yeah, which is a direct popular vote.
Yes. The candidate most preferred by the people would win, and it would open the door to more than 2 political parties seeking representation.
Okay, but in the event that there are tons of candidates, like the founding fathers originally thought, from too many parties, right, then the most popular candidate might only win with something like 37% of the vote, which isn't a very strong win if you're supposed to be representing the will of the people.
Right. Yeah, that's a problem. Okay. So there's also the National Popular Vote Interstate Contract. This one doesn't exactly abolish the Electoral College. It just sort of circumvents it. Each state agrees to give its Electoral College votes to the winner of the popular vote.
So this would be really good because the candidate most preferred by the people would win. Perhaps the biggest selling point is that it does not require any amendment to the Constitution. So if we got everybody on board, we could make this happen pretty quickly.
Yeah, we could institute it like for the next election.
Yeah, we would be ready to go by 2024.
Mm-hmm. However, it's a really weird and convoluted way to bypass the Electoral College. And more importantly, most of the states that agree to it right now are blue states. That's because red states benefit from the Electoral College at the moment, and they're unlikely to agree unless that changes. And swing states, those that routinely change from red to blue and back in an election, are unlikely to give up their voting power and the national spotlight during campaign season. And the NPVI just doesn't work unless everybody agrees to it.
Okay, this brings us to ranked choice voting. Which is a system that allows people to vote for multiple candidates, ranking them from first to last in order of preference. So instead of just electing the candidate you want to win, you rank the candidates from first, second, third, and so on.
Yeah, so if a candidate receives more than 50% of the votes, they win outright, easy.
But if there is no clear winner, nobody hits that 50% threshold,
right,
then the candidate receiving the least number of votes is eliminated, and votes from ballots ranking that candidate first are redistributed to the second choice on the ballot. So if you had selected Elizabeth Warren as your first choice, but she didn't make 50%, then she's going to be cut out.
She got the least number
She got
of
the
votes.
least number of votes, yes. So then if you ranked Pete Buttigieg as your second choice, he is now your first choice. And we keep doing this process, and we repeat it over and over again until somebody hits that 50% threshold.
Yes. Using this method, the winner always represents the will of the people and always wins with over 50% of the votes. It also encourages more political participation from voters who feel that their voices will now be heard.
And this is done in part by eliminating the danger of vote splitting or vote spoiling. So you can vote for the candidate that most aligns with your values, and you don't have to worry about taking away votes from the safe candidate.
Right. So progressives, in particular, are constantly told by centrist Democrats to vote blue no matter who. And ranked choice voting would mean that citizens would not have to sacrifice major platform priorities just to ensure that the other guy didn't win.
And this sounds amazing. But it will take an amendment to the Constitution. So we would have to work really hard to get everybody on board.
Right. Okay. So the Electoral College is outdated. It makes no sense, and it's literally the worst, and it must go. What can we, the people, do to get this done? The fastest way forward is the National Popular Vote Interstate Contract. If that sounds good to you, you can start by calling local leadership and urging them to join the NPVI. But we want to talk about ranked choice voting.
Here's the thing. This idea, I'm going to tell you the thing. I'm going to tell you the damn thing. Here's the thing. This idea is not fringe. It is being used already in so many states in varying ways. And it's pretty popular where it's being used.
Yeah, from municipal or city elections all the way to statewide. It will take a lot of effort. It will. It will take a lot of effort and bipartisan agreement to amend the Constitution. But we have come so close in the past. And the Electoral College has hung on by a thread each time because of racism. Not because of lack of bipartisan support for its abolishment. It's not because it's this great idea that everyone loves. Everyone hates it. They want it to go. And racists keep it in because of slave holding, slave ownership, because of white supremacy, because of slave ownership, because of segregation, and now because it disenfranchises minority votes.
Thanks, Electoral College.
And that's that. And that's that on that.
And that's that on that. Alrighty. We are coming to the end of this episode, and we want to finish with a quick summary. So, first and foremost, the Electoral College is racist, white supremacist garbage.
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 Ranked choice voting is the GOAT, the greatest of all time.
Demagogues are a real thing, and the Electoral College has done literally nothing to prevent them.
Honestly, it's upsetting to me that these well, they weren't old. It's upsetting to me that these well-educated white men who thought that everyone else was too stupid to pick their president were like, we would never be fooled by a demagogue candidate. It's the others.
Me and my fabulous bound wig, we're too good.
The demagoguery can't penetrate the wig.
Maybe that's what they were. The wigs were not fashion statements. They were brain protectors.
They had foil on
like
the
Magneto's
inside.
helmet. An X-Men foil on the inside. It's like the OG tinfoil hat. Oh, man. Oh, man.
Oh, dear. Side note, I have a personal request. Can we retire the term founding father? It creeps me out. It's gross. It really weirdly suggests a paternalistic love and devotion we're supposed to have for these old white men.
Disgusting.
Who personally enslaved and murdered Black people, who commanded the murder of millions of indigenous peoples from over 600 native nations.
Who considered women to be property.
And who generally thought that anyone outside of their circle was literally too stupid to be trusted with the election of their own leaders. It's nauseating. I'll allow founders. I shall allow it. I'll allow founders, framers of the Constitution, founding leaders even. It's fine. But founding fathers is so gross.
It's like a weird political kink.
It's weird.
It's like the governing part, like the governing version of daddy.
The founding daddies.
Founding zaddies.
Zaddies.
Daddy, can I have some human rights?
Please.
Please. Oh, gross. I grossed myself out.
Ew. It's honestly, though, language matters.
It does.
Rhetoric matters. And rhetoric is real. And people use language to affect you emotionally, like demagogues.
I'm also just realizing this.
And also, they didn't ask to be called founding fathers.
No. Well, did they? I'm wondering, because
maybe they did.
founding fathers suggests that men can only lead. Like, I wonder
Yes,
if that
it
kind
does.
of language is why it's taken us so long to get to a female VP, to get to female leadership, because we have been brainwashed by the idea of founding fathers. It's very male heavy.
Well, I think it's definitely part of it.
Oh, sorry, that was like a in the moment thought of like, holy
Certainly.
shit, the brainwashing, the cultiness of our government.
Yeah, just language matters.
Mm-hmm.
Language frames how you view the world. And I'm not calling them founding fathers ever again.
Never.
Never.
Founding daddies.
Also, he didn't create the Constitution from his peeper.
It's like a kidney stone that grew into it. So tell us about how the United States started. Well, I had a kidney stone, and it was so big that I turned it into a government.
Disgusting.
That's disgusting.
Disgusting.
I'm so disappointed in myself for thinking that.
Hmm.
So the public perception is that the framers of the Constitution were these incredibly brilliant men who knew exactly what they were doing and had thought out in painstaking detail every element and facet of the way the United States government was going to work.
Yeah. Probably because of the revisionist history that's taught in United States schools. In reality, we need to remember that the Constitutional Convention was long, exhausting, and frustrating, and these men were mostly doctors, lawyers, businessmen, and military commanders. They were attempting to create a brand new form of governance, and many systems that we take for granted as the way our country is meant to run were slapdash attempts at compromise and little more than experiments. And the framers knew this. That's why there is a system for amending the Constitution.
In short, the Electoral College experiment has failed, and it is time. It is long past time for a new system.
Thank you for listening. Check out our sources and a transcript of this episode on our website, www.whosthatpod.com.
And please be sure to check out our YouTube channel, which is where we have posted these as videos with closed captioning for anybody who might be hearing impaired so that you can follow along as well. We also have all of the socials, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, all of which are at Who's That Pod, except for Twitter, which is Who's That Pod. Just take out the A and that because somebody already had it, and we'll fight about that later. But please follow us on the socials. We're always posting updates about episodes. Maybe some behind the scenes things will sneak their way in there if we're feeling particularly adventurous.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And make sure to buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/whosthatpod if you like what we're doing here and you want to make sure that we can continue to employ our lovely producer Kathleen to make this make sense.
Please, God, we need her. Please buy Kathleen a coffee. Several. Hundreds.
So many coffees.
Buy her a whole damn Starbucks. Or Dunkin'. Whatever she likes.
Sitting there. This is incentive to buy us a coffee. If you buy us a coffee, you also get to view
Billy.
depictions of Billy.
Here's my baby. Give her kisses. Say hi, Billy.
Oh, right on my mouth.
Oh, yeah. She has no fear of COVID. My baby. Yeah. She just wanted to be part of this show. My baby. She's being so good because I want to be part of it. Okay. Her foot is like shaking the table. All right, baby. I'm going to put you back outside, okay? We're almost done. We want to close today's episode with a quote from Maya Angelou, who says, "I did then what I knew how to do. Now that I know better, I do better." Thank you so much for joining us on our journey to learn and do better. Bye.
Thank you, Wisconsin.
Thank you. Thank you, America. Taylor, thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Thank all of you, everyone who is taking the time to listen to us, to follow us on social media, and for those of you who choose to support us financially, thank you, but bold and italicized.
Yes.
We love you.
Good night.
And good luck. That's from
Fade
that
to
movie.
black.
Okay, goodbye, everybody. We're done here.